John sat silently in his old Toyota Corolla, fingers tapping slowly on the steering wheel. In front of him was the lot of John's trucks, his very first and most important dealership in the chain of garages and truck lots he had built over the past 15 years. The trucks lined up perfectly under the late afternoon sun, polished exteriors gleaming, windows reflecting the sky as if to declare, this place was a success. But John knew all too well, glossy surfaces didn't always tell the truth. For the past 6 months, while sales reports remained steady, the number of positive online reviews had been dropping at an alarming rate. Some customers still praised the friendly staff and solid vehicles, but many had started leaving complaints. Hidden fees, forced warranties, unclear consultations. At first, John chalked it up to subjective opinions, but that uneasy feeling soon became a persistent knock in his head, one that wouldn't go away. He had built his business on one simple promise: fix trucks, sell trucks, do it with heart. And if this place was breaking that promise, he needed to know. Not from paperwork, not from reports. So today there was no Mercedes, no pressed shirt, no watch worth a month of his employee's salary. Instead, a faded t-shirt, worn-out jeans, 3-day stubble, and a baseball cap pulled low to hide most of his face. Today his name was Mike Thompson, a construction worker looking to buy a used truck. None of the new staff at this branch had met him in person. John had left day-to-day operations in the hands of his management team while he expanded to other cities. That absence had now become the perfect cover. He took a deep breath, stepped out of the car, and walked with a deliberate, slightly limping pace, like a man fresh off a shift. He didn't need to act perfectly, just honestly, like a regular customer, because sometimes to see the truth, you have to disappear from your own role. Hey there, I'm Tom. What can I help you with today? The voice came cheerfully from a young salesman as John stepped onto the lot. Tom's face was fresh, his smile practiced and perfect, like he'd been trained for it. John gave a small nod and lowered, his voice to a coarse, gruff tone. Name's Mike. I'm looking for a durable pickup for construction work. Got about 35 grand, hoping to find something worth the cash. Tom immediately led him down the lot, occasionally sneaking glances toward the office window, where Dan Reynolds, the recently promoted sales manager, stood watching like a hawk. John took note of everything. A silver Ford F-150 was presented. Clean, solid engine, great specs. It was one of the branch's best sellers. But then Tom let something slip. The sticker price is 37 grand, but that includes the Carter's protection package. Only available here. John frowned slightly. That package was supposed to be optional, not automatically included in the price. But he didn't show his concern. He nodded, asked to see the engine, checked the tires, and agreed to a test drive. Everything followed protocol, too perfectly, and that very smoothness felt artificial to John. When they returned to the office to start paperwork, the atmosphere shifted. Tom looked uneasy, his hands trembling slightly as he entered data into the system. Just as he was about to mention the documentation fee, another voice cut through the air, tense, frustrated. John turned his head slightly, pretending to examine the price sheet, but his ears honed in on the conversation at the next desk. A middle-aged customer, dressed in a local delivery company uniform, was arguing. His face flushed red, his hands gripping a stack of paperwork. A small photo slipped to the floor. 3 kids around a birthday cake. We budgeted down to the last dollar. The last guy said 32 grand. Now you're saying 35. Because of random fees? I don't have another 3 grand. John leaned over and whispered to Tom, "What's going on over there?" Tom hesitated, about to respond when Dan walked out. Perfectly dressed, hair slicked back, smile calibrated. But his eyes were ice cold. "I'm sorry, Mr. Henderson. All the fees are clearly listed at the end of the contract. You should have read more carefully before signing." John felt his chest tighten. Dan wasn't just denying responsibility. He was implying that this customer, a hardworking man, was simply ignorant. And in that moment, everything became painfully clear. The stench of manipulation, of deceit, Right in the very office John once believed represented transparency. He quietly stepped away from the desk, pretending to need the restroom. But really he wanted to see for himself how this showroom, his first and most trusted, was actually being run. He walked through each section with a calm demeanor, but sharp eyes. He noted the little things that others might ignore: averted glances, forced smiles, half-true, half-deceptive advice. At the finance department, he overheard two employees whispering, "Man, that guy was way too easy. No wonder Dan told us to push the insurance package. By the time he realizes it'll be too late to cancel." John turned away, keeping his face neutral. But inside, a chill shot down his spine. He had sworn that John's trucks would never use dirty tactics to pressure customers. And yet here it was. His very first location, the one he built brick by brick, now betraying every principle he stood for. Back at the desk, John asked Tom casually, the young man still handling paperwork, for Mike Thompson, "Hey Tom, that protection package Dan mentioned earlier, mandatory?" Tom looked around, then lowered his voice. "Not technically, but if we leave it out, Dan usually makes us lower the trade-in value or flags the customer's loan app as high risk. Some of the guys already got hit for pushing back, so no one dares to challenge him anymore." John nodded slowly. That confirmed his worst fear. This wasn't a mistake by one bad actor. This was a rigged system, built deliberately and enforced through threats. He continued walking the floor discreetly, recording conversations. He took photos of price sheets filled with vague adjustment fees. Every time he saw a customer hesitate, he listened. Most were being cornered, sign now or lose your deposit. At the reception desk, an elderly woman flipped through her documents again and again. Her son had just taken out a loan for a used truck, but only now had they discovered a $2,000 market adjustment fee. She pleaded with the clerk. "My grandson told me $15,000 was enough. Why does it say $17,500 now?" The clerk replied, cold as ice. "That's the new policy. If you don't agree, we can't move forward." John walked by silently, his eyes fixed on the woman's disappointed face. What he was witnessing was no longer just misconduct. It was a betrayal of trust. And in a business built on reputation, trust is the greatest asset. Back at Tom's desk, John exhaled quietly. "I need to speak to Dan Reynolds. Privately." Tom looked surprised but nodded. The storm was approaching, but John already had enough ammunition to flip the board. Once inside the manager's office, Tom closed the glass door behind them. Dan looked up from his computer. A flash of irritation in his eyes quickly vanished, replaced by a polite smile. "Mr. Thompson, right? Tom said you had a few questions about the fees?" John sat down across from him, relaxing his shoulders, keeping the calm tone of a working-class man trying to stay respectful. "Yeah. Just seems like a few of those extra fees aren't very clear. Heard a guy outside getting all flustered. Got me a bit worried too." Dan leaned back in his chair, smile shifting to something more friendly, and calculated. "I get it. Let me level with you. This is just how business works. Every showroom has its ways of maximizing profit. Protection, plans, dock fees, market adjustment. We call it the premium experience package. Not required on paper, but if customers decline, their financing might face complications." John stayed quiet. Silently, he flipped on the recorder in his shirt pocket. Dan continued, growing bolder with every word. "You know how it is. Most folks are buying trucks. They're regular people. Don't read the fine print, they trust the salesman's smile. By the time they realize what's happening, they've already signed. And once that's done, too late." John gave a slow nod, his voice low and firm. "And what about the owner, this John guy? Does he know any of this?" Dan burst out laughing, the sound sharp and arrogant in the quiet room. "John? That guy only cares about expanding branches, counting his money, and running PR campaigns. As long as the reports show profit, he doesn't care what happens. I run this showroom the way it should be run, and you're seeing the results." He leaned forward, lowering his voice like he was letting Mike in on a dirty little secret. "Between us, I make more from off-the-books extras than my actual salary. Protection plans, add-ons, premium insurance, every piece kicks back a percentage. Me and a few guys on the inside, we know how to split the pie. At that exact moment, John slowly removed his cap, then his sunglasses, and stood up. The voice that followed was no longer Mike Thompson. It was John, the owner of John's Trucks. And now I know everything, Dan. Dan's face went ghost white. He jumped to his feet, stammering, I'm the guy you said was too busy counting money to care. But today, I sat right here, listened to every word you said, and recorded all of it. John pressed a button. From the phone in his hand, Dan's voice played clearly. They don't read the fine print by the time they realize it's too late. The owner only cares about expansion. I make more from off the books than my salary. The silence that followed was suffocating. But John didn't stop. He stepped to the desk and pressed a button on the intercom system. All employees, please report to the main showroom. Emergency. Meeting. Within 2 minutes, everyone stood around the reception desk, eyes locked on the glass office door. John stepped out and stood tall among them. His eyes carried the weight of disappointment. I'm John. And today, I saw things I never thought possible. He raised his phone and played the recording for the entire room. Each of Dan's words hit like a hammer, striking at the core of every employee who once believed this place stood for honesty. When the recording ended, John turned to Dan. You're fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Dan shouted back, You'll regret this. I'm the one who made this place profitable. John simply replied, I'd rather lose money than lose integrity. 2 guards approached. Dan struggled briefly but was quickly removed from the building, his shouts falling flat in the heavy silence. John turned back to the staff. Starting tomorrow, this place will be different. We're doing it over, from scratch, transparently. Or not at all. From the back of the room, a single clap echoed. It was Mark Henderson, the delivery worker with the family photo. John met his eyes, now misty and grateful, as he held the stack of paperwork. John smiled. Mark, I think it's time we revisit your contract, because trust should never be calculated as an added fee. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the glass walls of John's Trucks, but it didn't feel like any morning before. There was no tension, no fake smiles from salesmen chasing quotas, only silence, and beneath it, hope for something new. John didn't enter from the back door this time. He walked through the front, shoulders square, in a plain shirt, holding a small sign. Starting over with truth. He rolled his desk out of his private office and placed it in the middle of the showroom, where everyone could see him. No more distance, no more hierarchy. He was here, with them, with the customers. In the morning meeting, he spoke calmly. I didn't come here just to fire Dan. I came to take responsibility. Everything that happened, whether I did it or not, was allowed to happen on my watch, and that's on me. A long silence followed. I won't punish anyone for speaking up. If you've been forced to do something wrong, this is your chance to make it right. Starting today, we're reviewing every sales file from the past 6 months. Then he looked at Tom, the young salesman who had dared to speak the truth. Tom, I want you to lead our new customer advocacy team. You'll be the first person customers go to when they have questions. Can you handle that? Tom froze for a second, then nodded, eyes glistening. I'll give it everything I've got, Mr. John. That very week, the office was transformed into a full-scale customer resolution center. Former clients who had been charged unclear fees were invited back. They were listened to, their contracts reviewed, and, when appropriate, refunded. One older truck driver showed up with his wife. They had paid nearly $4,000 in gold service package fees they never fully understood. When they were refunded, and heard John personally apologize, the wife broke down in tears. I thought we'd never get that money back in our lifetime. But it wasn't just about refunds. John reached out to Josh, a former employee who had been fired by Dan for being too honest, and asked him to return as head of ethical sales training. Josh stood in front of the new team and said it plainly. We don't sell trucks. We build trust. If someone buys a truck today and feels safe, they'll come back. and bring their whole family next time. Not long after, the media began picking up on what was happening at John's Trucks. Articles didn't just praise the undercover boss exposes corruption angle, they highlighted something deeper. This wasn't just a place fixing vehicles, it was restoring faith. John even established a scholarship fund, the Henderson Fund, named after the customer who refused to be silent. Its mission, to help children of loyal customers pursue college. The first recipient, Mark Henderson's daughter. 6 months later, the dealership hosted a community day. The lot overflowed with families, neighbors, former and new customers. There was music, free food, games for the kids. John moved through the crowd, shaking hands, chatting warmly. He stopped when he saw an elderly couple examining a new pickup. Tom stood beside them, speaking clearly, walking them through every detail with transparency. No secrets, no games. The couple nodded, visibly impressed. They didn't just see a shiny new truck. They saw honesty, something rare. That evening, John stood at the exact spot where he had once parked his beat-up Corolla in disguise. Now the lot was glowing with lights. Each truck lined up like a promise, priced fairly, built well, offered honestly. Mark Henderson approached and placed a hand on John's shoulder. "You did something most people wouldn't even try, John. You didn't just fix the trucks, you fixed the entire system." John smiled. "Sometimes to make it right, you've got to tear down what went wrong." He turned and placed his hand on a newly framed photo now hanging in the lobby. His father, standing outside their first garage in 1982. Beside it, a carved wooden plaque read, "Reputation doesn't live in advertisements. It lives in how you make things right." 1 year since John Carter walked back into his own showroom in disguise, John's Trucks had become something far more than a place to sell and repair trucks. It had become a symbol of something people thought was gone from modern business: integrity. Sales were rising again, not as explosively as during Dan's era, but stronger, more sustainable, and built to last. Even more importantly, the return customer rate hit a historic high. Not because of gimmicks, but because of trust. A 15-minute segment aired on local television titled "The Hidden Boss and the Comeback of Trust." It ended with a quiet image. John standing shoulder to shoulder with his staff sweeping up so. After Community Day, no one called him boss, just John. But for John, the journey wasn't over. In a strategic meeting, John stood up and said, "If one showroom can change like this, why can't we scale it across the industry?" From that idea, the Trust First initiative was born, an ethical business framework for the auto repair and sales industry designed by John himself. It included 100% transparency in pricing and additional fees, value-based employee training, not just skills but ethics, customer protection policies against pressure sales and vague contracts, independent complaint channels, bypassing direct management. It wasn't long before other businesses in the industry began reaching out, asking to learn from John's model. Some competitors who once mocked him for being dramatic were now either silent or quietly copying his every move. One late afternoon, after everyone had gone home, John sat alone in his office. On his desk was a single postcard. The front showed a young woman in a graduation gown. On the back, it read, "Dear Mr. Carter, I'm Emily Henderson, Mark's daughter. Mark's, if it weren't for you, I might never have gone to college. It's not just the truck my dad bought. It's the fact that you gave our family a reason to believe fairness still exists. Thank you for standing up when it mattered." John placed the postcard beside the framed photo of his father. No awards, no plaques. Just that, not the trucks, not the profits, but the trust that had been restored. One customer, one family, one voice that finally got heard. And the greatest thing John ever left behind wasn't listed in the company's ledgers. It lived in the eyes of every employee who looked up to. Greet a customer with pride and said, "We're not perfect, but we're honest."